Me a Library. Today is part 2 of my Disney version compared to the original adaptations of the fairy tales that I am about to do.
Start on the chores and sweep till the floor's all clean. Polish and wax, do laundry and mop and shine up. Sweep again, and by then it's like 7:15.
The adaptation of Rapunzel is she is a beautiful, beautiful princess who was taken from her castle, from her home, by this witch who wanted to be beautiful. And in the Disney adaptation there is a flower that can heal her mother when she's pregnant with her. And her mother drinks the liquid from the flower and she heals, but because of that she gives her baby all the magical powers, which is why her hair is yellow and glows. And it's got like healing properties. So the witch uses Rapunzel's hair to allow herself to live forever and to be beautiful. She then kidnaps her and takes her to the tower, locks her up, and then this is when Flynn Rider comes along and he finds the tower, he climbs up in the tower, meets Rapunzel. He then takes her off on an adventure in exchange for the stuff that he's stolen. It happens to be her crown that she doesn't know about, and then the witch finds out, and then there's this sort of like this adventure, and then she finally goes back home to her mother and father, but this time with short hair and no magical abilities. Now, the real story by Grimm Brothers is actually probably the most romantic one that I'm going to be telling you, because it actually has a really good, happy ending. So this may be the happiest of stories. Rapunzel's parents were farmers who got her after exchanging a bit of this plant for a salad with a witch when she was a baby. When she was 12, the witch locked her up in a tower that had no doors or stairs, just this giant window. The only way to get Rapunzel was to climb up her beautiful long hair, and that's when you would get into the tower. So one day a prince walked past the tower and heard her singing. He goes up to the tower the same night that Rapunzel decides to marry him. When the prince returns, he climbs up the tower to find the witch in her place. She chucks him out the window and thorns go through his eyes, turning him blind. He then spends months and months roaming around the woods and eventually hears Rapunzel's voice. He then finds her and she's given birth to 2 children, his children, and her magical tears give him back sight and the two marry and live together happily ever after. That's actually so lovely. Okay, so the next one, Pocahontas.
Should I choose the smoothest course, steady as the beating drum? Should I marry Cocoam? Is all my dreaming at an end?
So Pocahontas is a daughter of a chief. Her best friend is a raccoon, and this ship arrives from England and takes them to Virginia, to this place where they believe there is gold. But actually there isn't any gold. The gold that is there is beautiful corn, sweet corn on the cob, and I love sweet corn, so I'd like to go there. So she falls in love with this guy called John Smith, who's one of the guys from the English army. She then falls in love with him and he almost gets killed by her father and everybody else because he accidentally kills, it's all by mistake, but one of the guys actually shoots Cocoam, and there's a beautiful song about him on the river bend. And she saves John Smith's life and he goes off, he goes back to England, and that's basically the story. So the true story to that, because Pocahontas is real, so this is another one of the Disney stories that's actually real, is in real life she was the daughter of a chief in the territory known as Virginia. The natives captured John Smith in exchange for him as hostage. She saved his life and that was the only relationship they had. She was then eventually kidnapped by settlers and held for ransom, and then this is where the next Pocahontas film comes into it, where she goes off to England to save, because John Smith's apparently dead, so she goes there to try and save the relationship that they had, and that's where she meets John Rolfe. And this is the guy that she marries when she's 17. She then travels to England to live and is very, very sick on her way. They then have a son, I think they only had one son, and then on their way back to see her family, she dies on the boat, and she was only 21 years old. So that's the true story of Pocahontas. You can search for her online. She's actually real, and her lineage still goes down to this day. So I think it just seems to be only her and Mulan so far, the true stories. So the next one is Hercules. Hercules is a true story because it goes back to Greek mythology and the myths and legends, and I always believe in the Greek myths and legends of the gods, so that's something that I love. But Hercules isn't real in such like Mulan and Pocahontas, but he's probably one of the most real out of all of them, including those other two that I said. So Hercules is the young god of Zeus and Hera, and when he's a baby, his uncle Hades gets very jealous. He creates this potion that's going to get rid of all of his godliness, and basically turns him mortal. Now he's spoken to the Fates, and they said that when all the stars align, that is when the Titans, okay, which Zeus locked up a long time ago, they will then be able to escape, and then Hades can use them to basically take over Mount Olympus and be king of the gods. Because a little bit of history of mythology with you. There are three brothers. There's Hades, there's Poseidon, and there is Zeus. So when they had the Battle of the Titans, which is with their parents, there's a big story about that, but that's another story. They then decided to split up things with each other. So Zeus decided to take every single thing apart from the sea, which is where Poseidon rules, and the underworld, which is what Hades rules. So Zeus rules the skies and the land, and obviously is king of all the gods because he was the one that did the most in the Titan battle. Poseidon then got the sea, and that includes the rivers, and then Hades gets the underworld. So in a way, Hades probably gets what Zeus gets, but probably better because he's the one that ends the lives and actually has the whole of the underworld, which is probably about the same size as that. But actually he feels that he's got the worst because he has to stay down below, whereas they get to go wherever they want. So then there's obviously the whole Persephone thing where he falls in love with her and whatever. So he's always seen as the bad guy, but I actually think he's pretty cool. And I actually do like Hades. He's probably one of my favourite gods. So yeah, anyway, Hercules then does these labours. He then saves people and starts to become a god, slowly. So in order to live on Mount Olympus, he has to be a true hero. Now, although all the things that he's doing are very heroic, he hasn't shown that he's a true hero yet. This is where Megara comes along. Now, she is feisty, great, and she's amazing, okay? Now, she starts to fall in love with Hercules, and he starts to fall in love with her. But because she's working with Hades, she feels like she can't really be faithful to him and love him the way that he deserves. So Hades then decides to basically tell Hercules what she's been doing. He gets very upset and he promises that Megara won't get hurt. Megara then gets hurt, which means that Hades then gets his strength back. Because of the whole stars turning into a point thing, that's where the whole hey, I'm going to take your magic from you, Hercules, your power from you, Hercules, so that we can do this for this day and Megara won't get hurt in that time thing. I mean, you should know because you probably watched Hercules, so you kind of know what I'm talking about. But anyway, he then shows that he's a true hero by rescuing Megara from the underworld and taking her from Hades, and because he's shown he's a true hero, he then gets to live on Mount Olympus, but he turns it down to go live with Megara. Okay, so the true story of Hercules. Hercules isn't as nice as we all believe him to be. Hercules has got a very big story. It all starts with him actually not being Hera's son, only Zeus's son. But there's a big story with Hercules. I'm just going to give you a quick summary about what Hercules is like. So Hercules is best known for being the strongest of all mortals, and even stronger than many gods. He was the deciding factor in the triumphant victory of the Olympians over the giants. He was the last mortal son of Zeus, and the only man born of a mortal woman to become a god upon his death. Offsetting his strength was one of the noticeable lack of intelligence or wisdom. Once, when the temperature was very high, he pulled out his bow and threatened to shoot at the sun. This, coupled with strong emotions in one so powerful, frequently got Hercules in troubles. While his friends and cousins Theos ruled Athens, Hercules had trouble ruling himself. His pride was easily offended, he took up grudges very easily and never forgot them. His appetite for food, wine and women were massive in his strength. Many of Hercules' great deeds occurred while he was doing penance for stupid acts done by anger and carelessness. It would be very easy to view Hercules as a muscle-bound buffoon. Indeed, many of the Greek comedy playwrights use his character this way. Even amongst serious critics, he was often seen as a primitive, brutal and violent man. There is much evidence to support this view. His weapons of choice was a massive club. A customary garment was lion skin with the head still attached. He wounded some of the gods and threatened the priests as Apollo and Delphi when an answer to his questions was not forthcoming. He was creator of most of his problems. So Hercules is not a very nice guy. But let's stick with the story and compare them. So this involves Megara. So Megara was actually the daughter of Thebes, which is the town that Hercules tries to save. Hercules took her marriage by force, they had 2 children and did live happily ever after. That's until Hera, Zeus's wife, drove Hercules mad and killed Megara and their children. Tormented by grief, he then completed the 12 tasks, which includes the giants and Medusa, but this was all actually done a lot more dangerous than Disney shows you. So the story is similar, slightly, but very, very different. So I do prefer the Disney one in this instance. Okay, the next one is the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Like fire, hellfire, this fire in my skin, this burning desire is turning me to sin.
So Quasimodo was a young man born with disabilities, and there's this great song called Maria Hellfire in the film. And basically he lives in the church, hidden away, not allowed to leave, because the guy that basically saved him was the guy that was killing his mother. So the church basically said to him, hey, you need to save this baby because you have basically caused this baby to be motherless. So he lives up in the tower and rings the bells of Notre Dame. And he saves Esmeralda from being executed by the church. And there's a handsome hero in it as well, and Quasimodo realises that him and Esmeralda won't be together, so they become best friends, and that's the gist of the story. Now the true story by Victor Hugo is that Quasimodo fails to save Esmeralda. In fact, he basically says to her, she's here. He then watches her as she's hung, and then he goes to her grave where she was buried. He then basically lives there and starves and dies. Years later, the grave is opened by somebody who finds both of their bones, and when they try to separate them, they turn to dust. That's really grim, actually. So in a way, it was like him saying, I'm sorry, Esmeralda, I've really mucked up here. And he goes to her grave and sits there and dies. But because he did that to her, I don't see why she'd want his bones near her. I mean, I certainly wouldn't. Next one, Pinocchio. This is my least favourite Disney film because it's actually so creepy and scary.
I got no strings to hold me down, to make me fret or make me frown. I hit strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me.
And being young and watching it with the donkeys, it really gives me nightmares. I like donkeys, but the fact that they turn into donkeys and it's horrible. I don't like it. Okay, so he's the son of a carpenter who has always wanted a son. So the blue fairy then comes down, grants him a wish, and turns his wooden boy into a real wooden boy. And if he's good, then he becomes a real boy. I'm a real boy. But every time he lies, his nose gets really long. So there's this wooden boy that's just a wooden doll. She then turns him into a real wooden doll, and then he eventually becomes a real boy. On his way to school, Pinocchio puts his father's life in danger, and he becomes a real boy. There's a whale, and there's a fox, and then there's these scary donkeys, and then they smoke in, and it's just really weird. So the real story, by Carlo Collodi, Pinocchio behaves badly since birth. He steals, and even his father calls him a wretched lad. One day, as a consequence of his actions, a cat and a fox hang him from a willow tree and watch him die as he swings in the wind. I don't think the real story is any different to the original Disney story. Well, not the original story, but the Disney version. I think they're both horrible. I really don't like Pinocchio. There's something about it. Like, in Once Upon a Time, Pinocchio was a good story. Like, I like the idea of a little wooden boy becoming a real boy and him lying with a nose, and there's always that with Figaro and all this, and Jiminy Cricket, but I don't like it. I think it's so scary. I really do. Like, it's so creepy. Okay, so my last one is Jungle Book.
Men, I'm tired of walking around. Oh, ooby-doo. I want to be like you. I want to walk like you. Talk like you.
Okay, so Mowgli is a boy that's been abandoned in the jungle, and a bear and a panther teach him to sing a song and forage for himself. So he becomes best friends with Baloo and my favourite, the panther, Bagheera. And whilst they're living a happy life with the elephants, and they live happily ever after until Shere Khan the lion, until Shere Khan the tiger comes. Now Shere Khan has this hatred for humans, and you do actually side with Shere Khan, not because he's after Mowgli, because Mowgli's nice, but because he's actually has this fear for humans. Now when you think about the adaptation that was out recently, Jungle Book, you actually see why, because Mowgli was actually the son of the man that Shere Khan killed, because he was trying to hurt Shere Khan. Now I understand that people would be scared of a lion or a tiger or a bear or a crocodile, and they would hunt them and hurt them because of that. But if you don't mess with them and they don't mess with you, then, you know, leave them alone and they leave you alone. But Shere Khan is now after Mowgli, so they all think that he needs to go back to the human village. So, depending on the adaptation with Disney, the more modern one is slightly different, but he lives with the wolves, he lives with Baloo, he lives with the monkeys, and there's all these different scenes within the book, but the moral of it is they're trying to take him back to the human realm, the human village, and Shere Khan's on his way to basically hunt Mowgli because he doesn't think the man should be in his forest. Although Lion's the king of the jungle, Shere Khan is the king of this jungle. So the real story, by Rudyard Kipling, is after killing Shere Khan, Mowgli discovers his real parents have been captured by a group of farmers. With the help of the wolves and the elephants, Mowgli destroys the village and its inhabitants. Okay, so he kills everybody in the village. Later he has to escape because they believe him as an evil spirit. Mowgli then finds peace in the village governed by the English. So really the story's the same, it's just the ending. Instead of Mowgli going off to the village and living happily ever after and waving to Baloo from the distance, he actually goes off into the village to save his family and takes all the animals and kills them all. I don't know if he saves the humans, it doesn't, his my parents, it doesn't say that. But he obviously has to escape the village, so he must save his parents. He then has to basically leave them behind, leave the village, and goes to the English. So yeah, that's my basic Disney adaptations, okay, and how they relate to the origins, the stories that were created before the Disney versions. So if I've missed any, or if you want me to research some and let you know some more, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to do it. I couldn't actually think of any more, but these are the ones that I came up with. So if there's any more, let me know. Like Alice in Wonderland, I should do Alice in Wonderland. The thing is with Alice in Wonderland is the Disney version is still very similar to Lewis Carroll's version, except the Lewis Carroll version has got lots of different stories within. Like, Alice in Wonderland and Alice in the Looking Glass are very, very different to each other. So that will be the next one I'll do, Alice in Wonderland, because that's one that I've forgotten. It's only because I've got my flamingo behind me that I've actually just remembered. I'm looking at it in the mirror. So I'll do Alice in Wonderland will be my next one. But if there's any others that I forgot, or if there's any others that you would like me to do, again, let me know in the comment section below and I will do them for you. So have a nice day. See you later. Bye.
It's like this, little britches. All you gotta do is look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities are Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life wherever I want.